Hey, it's Austin. I'm here to do a book review of a couple books. This one and this one. So this is one which I already reviewed, but I'm sort of revising my review after having a little more time to reflect on it. So I'm comparing these two books. These two books. So this first one that I'm going to talk about is called Selves, Understanding Transsexualism for Families, Friends, Coworkers, and Helping Professionals. That's definitely the audience it's written to, as you can tell when you read it. It's by... I'm gonna sneeze. Excuse me. That's embarrassing. I don't like to edit my videos because it's too time consuming, so that'll be in there as you have just observed, so I apologize. It's by Mildred L. Brown and Chloe Ann Rounsley. I think that Chloe Ann Rounsley is a trans woman. That's my understanding. Okay. This book is a bit outdated because it was written in 1996 originally, and then this one was published like in paperback in 2003, and it says includes updated resources because that's a list of stuff in the back of the book, like organizations like PFLAG and whatnot. I think it seems like they probably only updated that instead of the book as a whole, which is unfortunate because it really bothers me how outdated some of the wording is and some of the information is. But it's still useful and I still recommend it. Now, what I did, as I explained in the previous review, which I'll probably delete, is that I annotated the book myself before giving it to a family member, which I still have yet to do. I'm going to give it to my mom soon, maybe today. So I annotated it, I wrote down my own comments, I underlined stuff that I thought was especially important, so then I can comment and tell my mom through the annotations what is like weird and outdated or not. So one main thing that I'm not too cool on about this book is that it uses the word transsexual like every other word. As you can tell in the title, which mentions transsexualism. And I mean, I don't identify as a transsexual. I feel like, as this book actually explains, because this book is much more recent, which is awesome, using the word transsexual is sort of like calling gay people homosexual, like just in normal conversation, like, oh, I have a homosexual friend. Like, that sounds odd and medicalized, which I think can be kind of problematic or even offensive, so that's why I don't like transsexual. It sounds so medicalized and also kind of negative, I guess, due to historical connotations. So I wrote a note about that in the book so that when I give this book to my mom, she can read my take on that. So that's an example. And this book is pretty essentialist. It's pretty binary. So, like, if you're a trans person who feels like you don't totally fit, like, the traditional stereotypical trans narrative, or if you don't totally feel like you fit into the binary, like, where if you're like, I was born female and I'm now a man, and I'm completely a man, like, I want to fit into the gender binary. If you're not like that, then the book is a bit off, but still, I do think it has valuable stuff in it. So let me be more specific instead of rambling. As I pointed out in the previous review, which I might delete, there's some really problematic stuff, like she talks about the causes of transsexualism as if it's this, like, negative medical condition, you know, like heart disease, where it's important to figure out the causes, which I think just medicalizes it too much. She talks about the psychoanalytical potential causes of transsexualism, like, quote, it could, okay, psychoanalytical theories propose the classic smothering, overbearing mother and weak, distant, or absent father syndrome as an underlying cause for gender dysphoria. Like, no! Not everybody who has, like, an absent father becomes trans. And they've done studies, as this book mentions, that show that gender identity is, like, supposedly fixed by the time you're 6 years old. So, I mean, if you have an absent father after that, like, come on. That's just weird psychoanalytical, like, Freudian speculation. So, to signify to my mom that she should not pay too much attention to that, here's my annotation. Complete BS. No disrespect to psychoanalytic people, but I just think that's wrong. So anyway, one thing I like about this book, oh my god, this is a long video, sorry. One thing I like is that it does get more into the emotional aspects of being trans. The authors describe trans people's experience. Like, they have, like, page-long or paragraph-long quotes from the author's therapy patients, where the trans people are talking about their childhood, their adolescence, experiences with coming out, and so forth. So you get more of a real person's first-person perspective, which I think provides more of an emotional connection for the reader, and really lets non-trans people see into the minds or see into the experience of what it's like to be trans. Granted, not everyone's experience is at all the same, but I still think it's pretty cool. I actually felt like an emotional reaction and emotional connection as I read this. So it could get people to feel empathetic and to get more of, like, a genuine understanding of what it feels like to be trans. So that's good. So that's why I still recommend this book. And the other book, moving on, is called Transgender 101, A Simple Guide to a Complex Issue by Nicholas M. Teich, to use the German pronunciation, forward by Jameson Green. This one's great. I totally recommend this, like, for yourself, if you lack knowledge about trans, like what it means to be trans, or I totally recommend it for other people, like parents, family, friends, and so forth, because it's a pretty brief, to the point, wide-ranging overview of what the word transgender means and what the concept means. Now, as one reviewer wrote on Amazon about this book, the title says transgender, but it's mainly on transsexual people or experience. Like, because if you're thinking, like, oh, this book will be awesome because I'm just genderqueer, so this will be great to give to my family. Well, not really, because the chapters are pretty much all about, like, transsexual issues, and there's just one chapter about, quote, lesser known types of transgenderism, understanding cross-dressers, genderqueer people, drag queens, and more, as you can see here in the table of contents. So it's not so much aimed for, like, genderqueer people or anything like that. But for transsexual people, or learning about it, I think it's good. He wrote in the beginning of the book that, oh, by the way, the author is FTM, which is cool, because that's really important to have the perspective of somebody who is trans. You know, they know what's important to mention, in my view. So he explains that he wrote this book because he wanted it to be, like, a brief, accessible, introduction to the concept of trans and issues related to the trans experience and identity from more of an intellectual perspective rather than an emotional, empathetic, or experiential perspective, basically, which is really what it is. This book does not really get into what it feels like to be trans or like life experiences and like psychological feelings of trans people. It doesn't really get into that, which is why I think these could be a good combo, because this one does. He just very intellectually, briefly describes the concept. Like, for example, concepts such as the difference between sex and gender, the difference between those and sexual orientation. He describes those in depth with visuals, charts, such as this one, that shows the differentiation between sex, gender identity, and gender expression. So it's helpful for people who haven't really been exposed to those concepts before, so that is one reason why I recommend it. As I said, sexual orientation versus gender, what's the difference? And there are chapters about coming out as transgender, how people come out, when they come out. It's not really giving advice so much as just giving an overview, like, some people do this, some people do this, in just brief paragraphs and then moving on. It has a little bit about trans children, but it's mainly aimed at trans adults or people who know or people who want to learn about trans adults, which is why I picked it, because I'm an adult. It has an overview of hormone therapy, various trans surgeries, which this one does too, but this one is a bit outdated, especially when it comes to surgeries, especially when it talks about FTM surgeries. It's a little bit outdated, so this one is much better for that, although it just gives a brief overview of surgeries and hormones. It even has a chapter about trans history, and it has this big chapter about transgenderism as a mental health issue, the controversy over transgender identity as a disorder. It talks a lot about the DSM, and so it's not like you necessarily need to know about that if your child is trans, you know, like from the point of view of my mom. She doesn't necessarily need to know that much about the DSM, but whatever, maybe some people would find it useful. They have little brief bits about trans people in the military, a lot about issues of discrimination, but it's brief. Like, there's a page, maybe, about issues of restroom use and trans people. So it's just a good overview. It's recent, it's useful, but it's not like it covers everything. Like I said, it doesn't totally cover the emotional, experiential part of being trans as much. So, there you go. So if you're looking for books to give to parents or spouse or family or whatever else, yeah, I would recommend both of these, perhaps together, which is what I'm doing. Alright, let me know if you have questions. Thank you for watching. Bye.